Hello, I'm Lara Tiro.
And I'm Christine Farkas, and you're listening to
Munching on Molecules.
Hello, food enthusiasts, and welcome to Munching on Molecules. Today, we're about to embark on an exciting journey into the world of cultivated meat.
Cultivated meat, whether you call it lab-grown, cell-based, or cultured meat, is sparking a lot of interest and may have the potential to address some of the most critical issues of our time. Think climate change, resource scarcity, and animal welfare.
But what's the scoop on cultivated meat? Well, it's real meat, but here's the twist. It's created in a completely new way. Instead of the traditional farm-to-fork process, this meat is grown from animal cells in a carefully controlled environment. Think a lab or a bio-reactor.
Now, you might be wondering just how close we are to experiencing these advantages in our everyday meals. Are we talking about something that's still in the realm of science fiction? Or is it about to hit the plates of mainstream consumers? Stick around as we delve into the details with Celeste Trujillo, co-founder and chief technology officer at the Vancouver-based company, The Better Butchers. It's a story that's as fascinating as it is delicious, and we can't wait to share it with you. Stay tuned.
There's absolutely going to be a part two. Okay, because I don't know if we touched on this. This is kind of a snapshot. It's like a 30 to 40 minute conversation. And I suspect we'll have a lot more to talk about than what's going to fit in this time span. So, okay.
Hey,
so
cool.
Without further ado, Laura, you want to kick it off?
I'll kick it off. I'll start with an introduction. So Celeste Trujillo, did I say that right?
You did.
Is our guest today. She is a food scientist who has built a career in plant-based alternatives, product development, and food manufacturing. She has now co-founded a cultivated meat company in an effort to create meats without cruelty and less environmental impact, and more importantly, taste good. So Celeste, Christine, and I met in person about a month ago in Germany, and we got to know a little bit more about Celeste. I know Celeste through different people, but we've never really met in person. And we were so inspired by her story, her background, the company that she's co-founded. So we wanted to kick it off and wanted to dig a little bit deeper and understand her career and her work in the cultivated meat space. So I'm going to pass it over to Christine. She has a couple of questions.
Well, good morning, Celeste. Thanks so much for joining us. Laura, when we first were speaking of you, she's like, "Oh, you've met Celeste." I'm like, "Actually, I haven't." And we met in Germany, and it was amazing just to get to know you and to hear about your background, your story, and just all the work you're doing in this space. Like, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to pass it over to you, but really would love to understand about you and how you got into this industry, if you want to kick it off from there.
Yeah, for sure. The first thing is that, I love meeting you guys, and it was a great trip. And I'm so glad that you guys made this podcast. I'm so interested. I can't wait to hear what you guys have next. So when you speak about industry, do you mean, I just want to, like a scientist, is it cultivated meat industry? Do you mean that?
More even like the food industry? Like, what inspired you to get in the food industry? I feel like that's probably where it stemmed from, but yeah, would love to hear your perspective.
For sure. Well, thank you for that question. When I was younger, my mama actually grew up as a vegetarian, so she used to make analogs, Mexican analogs of everything you can find Mexican. She would make it, but in vegetarian. So I grew up with like a knowledge of there is alternatives out there. It was very normal to me to eat that. I was a weirdo in school. I was used to that. But when I asked myself, what do I want to do? To be honest, I really love the science of. So I started with a minor in chemistry. That's how I started. And learning about how everything is made, that was so interesting to me. My love for food came after. I never knew there was something called food science until I entered university. I think a lot of us share the same story. And that was definitely the building blocks, like chemistry, and then leading into food chemistry, and then into overall food science. And then, like in Mexico, research is way more prevalent and important, I guess, than the industry itself. So I kind of went into research and found myself getting a little bit bored. So then I stepped into what I wanted to do, and I thought that that's what I wanted to do, which is product development. And I guess a lot of us share the reality of what really R&D is, and I pushed through it. So I think that I really do love it because I still am doing it. So yeah, that's how I got here, I guess.
Amazing. Well, thanks for sharing that. And then I guess, how did you hear about Cultivated Meat? Maybe if you don't mind, walking us and also our listeners through what Cultivated Meat is.
Yes. So the idea came when I was still working for the Very Good Butchers. Mitchell and James were always interested in these alternatives, precision fermentation and fermentation, and what it could, mean to us in terms of product development. The pivot was quite hefty at that point, and we were already pretty in depth there with the capital investments that we had made, and that was a completely different science. But that's where I started. And when the Very Good Butchers kind of ended, or towards the end, because Mitchell had the idea of how about we start Cultivated Meat, and we start that as a standalone. At that point, I'm a food scientist, so I didn't know a lot about that kind of science. So we just started learning, or like educating ourselves into what kind of science does that and what kind of people do that, and put a job description together. So we found a subject matter expert, someone who actually did understand that side, and nothing to do with food. But now, as the worlds are colliding, now we all need to co-live, And in terms of the cultivated meat aspect of it, we all know that the plant-based wasn't as good as we all thought and we hoped for in terms of the consumer adoption. And one of the reasons is because products don't really simulate meat or the real animal counterpart as well as those consumers would love to. So when you actually think of how can I make the bigger impact, I am not here to insult anybody, but I don't think that the vegetarians or the vegans are necessarily the issue in terms of the impact globally on the environmental effects of animal agriculture. So it isn't the vegetarians and the vegans, and it's more about the flexitarians or the meat eaters, like I used to be, who always had in the back of their mind that, this is not completely right. We understand, especially being in food manufacturing, that there's something really wrong here. So cultivated meat might be the way to get that demographic, truthfully bringing high quality products out there with it. And that is the hope that cultivated meat, we do need to hybridize it with plant-based anyway, because we're all trying to keep the prices low. Even the bigger players are doing that anyway. But if we can get closer to meat, it would be meat. So then in this case, it would be cultivated meat.
Interesting. Laura, did you want to?
Yes, I love how you use the word co-live, because I think we are at a point in food science where we need to reach and experiment with other types of scientists as well, especially in this space, Celeste, and feeling very strongly about the hybridization model and getting to that price parity with meat itself. However, I know you mentioned that there are roadblocks in getting to that price parity point, and one of them is regulatory. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that. Like, what are some of the challenges and milestones that you've encountered here, especially in Canada, when it comes to, navigating that cultivated meat industry in terms of regulatory?
Well, the first thing is when you're doing plant-based meats or plant-based alternatives, you live in a world where you're inventing foods. So I was quite comfortable kind of like making foods happen with different ingredients. There's no process, but you use ingredients that are already approved. So then that's how you do novel foods when you don't, because there's no such thing as ingredients that have been approved for food. And when you don't have suppliers or ingredients that have been approved, so then you're really, really doing your own thing, like from the beginning to the end. When you're making your own media, and the media elements of that, those suppliers, they're more pharmaceutical. That's number one. Red flag is very expensive. Number two, their supply is not as big. So when you try to, like do exactly what you know to do, which is food grade ingredients that haven't already been approved for food, then you go into the challenge of they've been used for food, but maybe not at the concentrations you are used to. So when you put the media together for the cells to grow and expand and differentiate, all those elements that touch the meat, they are quite important. And there is no written formula for that. There's no suppliers, again, that have been approved or not approved, whatever it's called, that there's no questions asked. So you are literally in really like this dark space trying to pave your own way. It is a very competitive industry, so nobody really shares their knowledge. There's not a lot of papers out there. Even patents don't even give you that much information. So the bigger roadblock is that, yes, Health Canada doesn't have a pathway, but also the industry doesn't have one either. So as we are working together, we are in 5 years, we're going to have this pathway, but not right now. Right now, it is like you need to create that meat. Benchtop, it takes months. It's not like any other product development that I've done. So the turnaround for ingredients and formulations for you to know that they work, it's a long, long time. That would be one. I guess like the bigger regulatory hurdle is that we don't know what's going to be accepted at what concentrations is going to be accepted for us to yield a high quality meat, because again, not all meat is created equal anyway in the animal world, let alone in the cultivated meat world.
So just it sounds like, well, obviously early days and lots of troubleshooting and problem solving and bringing the right people together to really make this happen. How does it feel to be a trailblazer in this space, just to really get into territories that are unknown at this point in time?
I feel like this is exactly where I need to be. I didn't go into the plant-based world because it's easy, because again, like us who are doing product development and plant-based alternatives, we know that pathway has not been done, so we are creating it. So I'm quite comfortable with that, but I will say that it's very scary when you delve into 2 to 3 years getting regulatory approval. That is not, I mean, yes, we're all working really hard to get to that pre-submission or that pre-market validation, but once you're there, you're in the midst of bureaucracy, and maybe not that many people in that team, that look at the toxicology, the microbiology of novel ingredients in Canada and in the States. So the timeline they've given us is it's quite long. I would say that 18 months to 3 years, that's a long time. So that's, I don't know, like, how does it feel? It feels frightening, but I'm okay. I guess that's what we need to do. It needs to start somewhere. And we're all food manufacturers here. So we know that we need to start somewhere. And maybe in 2-3 years, it'll look completely different. But, continuous improvement is improvement. It's, just going with it, right?
That timeline gives me so much anxiety as a product developer. 5 years just waiting for Health Canada. And who knows, government changes, policy changes. So you're at their mercy, and I guess playing in the dark side, or what you call the dark side, I call the gray space, is part of product development, right? It's part of innovation. And I feel like we're all three of us familiar, but that timeline, it's crazy. Wow. So do you okay, so that's Canada and North America. How about getting into the other markets? How close are we to seeing it available in other markets? And what do you think needs to happen to get there? I mean, I just heard about Singapore, right? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, yes, there's definitely, and I will take it humbly, a trailblazer, but I know there's other people who are already there and they started many years ago. Yes, Singapore has commercialized it. Not really sure that other parts of the world are going to be as fast as Singapore. I think that generally speaking, I've never tried it, and I think that is where a lot of us are. How does it actually taste? And the marketing that goes associated with cultivated meat is outstanding. For me, that was a bigger surprise for me, that in the plant-based world, we're used to keeping everything secret until the day maybe after it launches, and it's like super competitive. Well, this world is the opposite. You start speaking about things before they actually happen, and in a way that is so big and loud that it looks and it feels like it's already there. We know that in the States, a lot of these companies have already gotten their like letter of no objections. So where is the product, and who has tasted it, and where is the feedback? That I'm not really sure. I guess I'm going to the Cultivated Meat Symposium in Las Vegas, and I'm hoping to actually taste something. That's my hope.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I'm curious, from what you're seeing so far, Celeste, are most companies doing almost like this hybrid method? Are they looking at hybrid models for building products? Or are they focusing really on cultivated meat as that 100%?
I'm pretty sure that everybody's doing hybrids, but again, I'm not really sure what everybody has under their sleeve. It's quite complicated. Meat is quite complicated, and there's many elements to it, not just the one. And the reality is that you can only do one metabolite in the bioreactor, so you need one bioreactor per element. So most people focus on obviously the meat portion of it. That is what we're missing, the muscle meat. A lot of people are focusing on the fat. Maybe some people are focusing on collagen. But when you think of putting it all together and making something like, especially muscle meat, that is 100% cultivated meat, I am very skeptical. I think that most people will have to use hybrids, and then we're like 10 years away from seeing muscle meat that is completely cultivated meat. And you can quote me on that in 10 years.
10 years.
10 years. There we go. Laura's like, oh my gosh.
That's a long development timeline. But like you said, Celeste, taste is king, especially in food. That is always the number one pillar when you're developing, because it has to taste great at the end of the day. And how do you develop something without really knowing what your competitive set is like? So I'm really hoping for you that you do get to taste it at the symposium. Christine and I attended World Food Day yesterday, and they had asked a question among the panel about their stance on cultivated meat. And it was quite funny to hear. There was maybe 5 people on the panel, Christine.
5 people.
And none of them had a stance. They were like, I need to research more. I need to learn more. So jumping into the question on consumer education and adoption, I mean, you talk about regulatory being a stumble block, but I think one of the other ones, as you mentioned prior, is consumer education and adoption. And what are your thoughts on that? Like, where do you see, how does that fit into the consumer landscape?
Well, when we first started the company, we started doing some discovery interviews, and that was the pattern. Like, everybody was saying, what is it? I just want to know if it's safe for me to eat, and what's the nutrition compared to real meat, and how is it made of? So I guess transparency is going to be key for all of us. I am really hopeful that the first players do a very good job, because it is going to be really hard for all of us to kind of convince the consumer otherwise, especially when it's not going to be that cheap. So I think the consumer might be ready. We chose pork because when you think of pork and the cured meats that you make with it, I believe that it's a little bit easier to get away with making a hybrid when you think of pepperoni, salami, as opposed to something that isn't. So when you make a hybrid and with plant-based, we'll inherently need to add other ingredients. I'm not really sure if people will still be okay with that. That is, when I think of the consumer, are they ready for cultivated meat? I am thinking we show them that it's safe and that the nutrition parity is there. but it actually tastes and looks good. I think that the look is really important right now. And what has been shown, is like made with chefs and everything. We know that world, right? We know that world because we've lived in it. It's so important when you put the food right in front of the consumer, will they want to eat it or not? And that is not the food that's prepared, is the food that is in the pack. And that is the food. So that's what I haven't seen. And I believe that I believe that we should do a very good job, and we can do a very good job, but I believe that food technology is going to play a bigger role than we all think. And that is being dismissed for some reason. But if we're talking about hybrids, we're talking about 70% of a formulation, and that is food technology. So we all need to be working together and doing a very good job. And yes, I think that we can convince people, but we have to do a very good job.
Yeah, the whole sensory experience is so critical. And I think from like a chef's perspective, where it's like, hey, what are the uses? What are the applications? How can I essentially use this ingredient or this product and use it as a substitute for what I'm already doing and make it compelling at the business to consumer level, right? Where they're creating something, but now it's like this new interesting space of like cultivated meat, and hearing about the opportunities within restaurants to even focus on that as one of their dishes, because it's different. Like, we know what pork tastes like, we know what beef tastes like, especially if we're eating meat as consumers. So I think there's that curiosity piece that will come into play from a consumer perspective. Like, what does this taste like? What is the texture? What does it smell like? Does it perform the same way? I think being human, we're also very curious creatures to understand different pathways. So I don't know, I think it's really, really exciting. And I think, like, from a chef lens, there's that interest piece too, because it is unknown. Like, what is this, and where is this going to be coming into play?
I would hope that we need to do right by our consumers, but also our clients and our customers, which means that chefs should be able to cook it in the same way as they would real meat, and they shouldn't adapt. So I'm hoping we nail that. That's number one. And I've been thinking a lot about how it is right now in terms of consumer acceptance might change in 5 years, when unfortunately the inevitable climate change reality would be clear, as there's no rock you go under to actually not see it. And the truths are going to start coming out, the reasons of that, and how we can, do anything. I'm not saying completely stop eating meat. What I'm saying is that inevitably we need to decrease the consumption, like, significantly. So we need to have better solutions now. And right now, if somebody's trying that diet, there isn't that many options out there, especially for meat eaters who have like a standard there. So I think in 5 years, it's not going to be as much of an option. It's going to be like a reality. This is it. Do you want to be part of this or not? And then meat is unsustainably cheaper than fruits and vegetables. And that eventually needs to change. I mean, how is that even possible? That plant-based is more expensive than real meat. How is that? If beef is, if the cows are ready to be slaughtered after 2 years of life and they've been fed all this plant-based ingredients, so then and then we're making food that is just like is done the day of, how could it be that meat is cheaper? If we, again, living in the food manufacturing where we know kg per hour, how is that? So eventually I think the reality will change. And that is where we're aiming for. Like, when those things happen, we'll be better prepared. Now it looks daunting, 3 years down the road. We need to start somewhere. And hopefully it's not like the COVID vaccine that happened when we were in the middle of crisis, right? That is, that's frightening.
But I think, like, learning from COVID and how everyone got together really quickly, and all the scientists were working together collaboratively, I think that is a key learning for, if we really want to tackle the issues now. Like you said, Celeste, collaboration and partnership is key. We have to break down some of these barriers and some of these, like you said, in plant-based, a lot of people were hiding behind their closed doors. They didn't want to share information, but this is the time. And honestly, that was one of the learnings I took away from yesterday's World Food Day is collaboration is key wherever you are, in government, in industry, or in the private sector. I think that's important to really push something that's really innovative and different. So yeah, and totally agree. I think chefs are your people that you want to start with because they are the early adopters, and I see that happening with Climax Foods in the cheese space, and there's one in the U.S. with the chicken. I think I can't remember the name of the company. So I really think that is the route if you want to get consumers, those early adopters wanting to learn more. I think you start with the chefs, right, Christine?
Yeah, and you get some pretty straight feedback, which is great. I think that's always helpful. You get that honest to goodness perspective, which is helpful just in terms of what's working, what are some of the challenges. And I think collaboration is certainly key in getting that feedback. But I think, doing that early work and creating something that, you're super passionate about and proud to put into the market, as well as that, obviously, that starting point. What are some of the gaps right now? What do you see as opportunities where others can get involved, whether from industry or from a consumer perspective? What are some of those gaps that folks can get involved?
Specifically with the cultivated meat space?
With cultivated meat, or maybe just looking at plant-based alternatives, but let's maybe touch on cultivated meat at this point.
Well, the first thing that I'm thinking of, and I reflect a lot on, the fact that the industry, like the research in academia, is not sharing as much information as we need. That is when you talk about collaboration and open collaboration, what is the purpose that the science and technology is doing for humanity? And I always go back to that when it gets very competitive because of investment and funding, and we might be missing what we are here to do. Having that honest conversation, there's a lot of startups that have gone under. Where is their science and technology? It stopped. It's not shared. And so what we're trying to do is make a better product that, nutrition and, better for the world and all that. So then when we don't share knowledge, everybody needs to start from the beginning. And startups, is not the best environment for a startup. So the bigger corporations will be the ones that have to lead the way. And I'm not really sure we have the same purpose. So that's number one. So when you talk about collaboration, I believe that knowledge should be shared so then we can advance way quicker is we're sharing our world, right? And then number two would be that I still feel that the biotechnology and the cell biology world is a little bit separate than the food industry and food manufacturing world. They're stepping into our world, which is us manufacturing food, and we know that very well. So I'm not really sure. I feel like we need to collaborate more, but we need to understand each other's needs much better so we can, from that stand, actually create something. So right now it's quite separate. I'm not really sure that if we're making food, if we're making cell-based, food, we are working together as much as we should. And that I don't hear a lot of IFD. I don't hear it at CIFSD. I'm not hearing that part that is inevitably coming our way. Precision fermentation and fermentation. We need to talk about that in a way that is a lot more beyond just food.
Yeah, totally. I mean, honestly, if it weren't for you and I started learning more about cultivated meat and the different industry players involved, from the bioreactors to biotechnology and that space, I don't think I would be wanting. Yeah, there's such a big gap coming out of a food science space. And, that was 20 years ago. So, I think it's changing quickly and it's changing fast. And I think there are certain people like yourself who are starting to encourage academia to start pushing and being a little bit more open to these different technologies, because you're right, it is a big gap if we want to go quickly. I really appreciate your passion in the space and the food manufacturing. That's your jam. But yeah, for sure, there needs to be more collaboration, especially in different departments, if we want to move forward quickly.
We've been trained that there's competition. We've been trained since we were little kids on that. And especially in science, we're trained to be super competitive. And it happens within even corporations, within a company happens. And that is, I guess, the first belief that I had to take away, which is we're not competing. This is definitely not a competition. We're minute compared to the animal or conventional demographic. There is no competition. And we just need to do better. That is what that is. If you believe in competition, then that means that you just need to be better than yourself, better than the product you have out there right now, better. That's what I'm hoping competition translates, really, just doing better for yourself.
Yeah. And overall too, it helps the world as a whole. And again, I'm going to refer to World Food Day because it's top of mind.
It's so fresh. It was yesterday.
It's so fresh. Yes, it was yesterday. And that was one of the key learnings is, we have to look long term, not the right here, right now, but also long term, and work with different spaces, people, others they called, which I think is very interesting. But anyways, Christine, I know we're at the top of our...
I know.
Well, I got so many other things to ask.
There's so many other questions. I know we wanted to keep it a little like 30 to 40, but it's also like, there was so much rich conversation here. We'll certainly have to come back to it. But Celeste, if you were to look 10 years into the future and have of course you have a hope for the future in terms of where you want to go and grow. And otherwise, I don't know if you'd be in this space because there's such you have to have the vision for the future. What is that? What does 10 years from today look like?
I am hopeful that food is not as expensive as it is right now. I am hopeful that it isn't more expensive to eat better. Yeah, I'm hopeful that it is accessible to more of the countries that we hope to be, and not only North America, but we're everywhere. So then there's alternatives everywhere. And whenever people think of meat, then now in 10 years, maybe they don't think of animal meat. They just think of meat and that's it. And whatever ways it comes, that's my hope, I guess.
I hope those hopes turn into reality sooner than 5-10 years. But we will hold hands together and make that happen, because I feel like this is the time. If not now, never.
I believe that, Laura. I think that is what we also have in common, the three of us. We're very active. Just do it.
Let's go.
Let's get it done.
and find wonderful people to collaborate with. And once again, collaboration is like action, and collaboration is totally key. So I think it's I'm inspired. This has been such a wonderful. Do we have any? I have so many more questions, but okay, I have a question for you.
Okay, one last one.
Wanted to ask, what is your favorite? Do you have a favorite podcast or food podcast that you just love listening to?
I just discovered the one who interviewed me, the Future of Foods.
Ooh.
Yes.
And they've interviewed since then. I mean, they have very wonderful guests, and Alex Chris, I believe he's really in it for the right reasons, and I really admire him. So I like that. I like that podcast, Future of Foods.
Okay.
Shout out to Alex. Yes.
Big time. We'll include that in the show notes.
The show notes. Christine. Well, thank you, Celeste, for being our very first guest for our Munching on Molecules podcast.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Oh, I hear your dog.